Whenever people make video games, it's hard to decide whether the video game is good or bad. But in my opinion, I've counted up the worst of the worst. Welcome to Cameron Top 10s, and this is a list for the top 10 worst video games of all time. For this list, I'm considering all video games that are just downright bad. And so we will determine which is the worst of the worst. And if there's a bad video game you think should be on this list, please leave it in the comment section below. But if that's all, let's get to the list. Number 10, Superman 64. With the launch of the Nintendo 64 and games like Super Mario 64 becoming very popular, it's no brainer that they'd want to put Superman, right? 10 million turds of wrong. The game was stupid, the rings were dumb, the gameplay felt sluggish, and not to mention, I hated every single... Although I've never played the game, I've heard it's goddamn awful, and it deserves to burn, along with all the other games on this list. So, it's not a 64 game I'd recommend picking off the shelf. Number 9, Mortal Kombat Mythologies. Mortal Kombat is an interesting kind of game. You fight, you kick people's asses, the best. But how can you make it 10 times worse? You put it on the Sega Mega Drive and you punch it in the face with the game solely based on one of the main fighters, Sub-Zero. And you can believe me, everything's terrible. It's like a barrage of random deaths, the battling is terrible. And every single part of those still images make me want to kick a puppy. Nevertheless, it's a terrible issue in the franchise. Number 8, Duke Nukem Forever. It's hard for me to question in the Duke Nukem franchise, but if there's one Duke Nukem game I think definitely is a turd in the works, it's Duke Nukem Forever. The gameplay was terrible, the story is flat, and the only cool part of the game is shooting. And they managed to take that and slather it in crap. So, I only have one thing to say to this kind of game, of this turd magnitude. Get nuked, Duke. Number 7, Goldeneye Rogue Agent. Movies and video games just don't mix. It's a common thing. But what do you do when you take something as cool as James Bond's Goldeneye and slather it? You make the whole game about Goldeneye and you just shoot it. The worst part was the game came in 2 parts and I think it gets the hate it deserves fairly. So, if you ever want to see a terrible James Bond game, I definitely suggest checking out GoldenEye Rogue Agent and slathering it right up the turd hole. Did you expect me to be good? No, I expect you to die. Number 6, Bubsy 3D. The second poster boy next to Sonic, Bubsy 3D is a stupid, rushed 3D PlayStation 2 game, which I think deserves its own credit because of how terrible it is. Bubsy is the second worst video game character to date, and this game is a good example of it. Even if he does have another game out now, he's still a terrible character, he's still a terrible Bobcat. It makes me just want to punch him in the face, you stupid Bobcat. The whole game functions like a 3D platformer, and its platforming will be its end. There's no goal, it's just a terrible game with terrible cat puns. Number 5, Sonic 06. Remember how I said Sonic has had lots of cool games? Well, that's a lie. Sonic 2006, also known as Sonic 06, is by far the worst Sonic game. What was supposed to be a good issue for 3D mechanics, after Shadow the Hedgehog, turned into a lame Final Fantasy weird bisexual. I don't care if you get to play as 3 characters. It's a stupid game. It's a dumbass stupid game, and I don't think it deserves any love. So, Sonic, you like going fast? I think this game, you were just too slow to win it. Number 4, Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde. Based off the Robert Louis Stevenson novel, Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde, released for the Nintendo Classic, is by far a terrible game. And I don't think anybody should ever play it. It's a stupid game, and it's a terrible, dishonorable way to mark one of the most best books next to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. If there was ever a game that deserved not to be based off a book, this is one I definitely reserved, even if there have been movies about it. Number 3, Link the Faces of Evil and Zelda the Wand of Gamalon. When Phillips released the CDI, 2 Zelda games were produced and directed by him and placed on it. Link the Faces of Evil and Zelda the Wand of Gamalon. I hate how terrible these games are. It's like an interactive adventure, except the adventure part's sucked out of it as you're just wandering around with creepy people asking you to do random fetch quests for them. And this is a Zelda game I'd suggest you store in a chest somewhere, because to be honest, they're just bad. It's like they've taken Telltale and made it a whole lot worse. Number 2, Bugs Bunny Birthday Blowout and Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle. Bugs Bunny is one of Looney Tunes' greatest characters, so putting him in a video game is a no-brainer. But that's more what other Bugs Bunny video games are for. And Birthday Blowout and Crazy Castle series, definitely not a good one. The controls are lame, and the names definitely should be switched, because Birthday Blowout was more of a platform game, while Crazy Castle was more of a puzzle game. So why not just switch them around? The games would still suck, but at least they'd have different names. The strangest thing is the 5th game is actually not starring Bugs Bunny, but starring Woody Woodpecker. Before we get to our number 1 spot, here are some dishonorable mentions. Dishonorable mentions are Pac-Man for the Atari, Bart's Nightmare, and Fester's Quest. And the number 1 worst video game is E.T. for the Atari. You knew this was coming. The number 1 worst game is E.T. for the Atari. I want to punch this game so bad. Even though the movie was fantastic, the game sucks. You get attacked by police officers, you fall in pits, and you can't even get... and you follow little green turds, which turn out to be goddamn Reese's Pieces. How am I supposed to tell what tiny little green squares are Reese's Pieces? This game is the bane of my existence. The plot is you have to find 3 telephone pieces so you can phone home. Then you go to the landing site, but even that's a chore because the pieces are in holes. The game sucked. The game still sucks now, and it caused the game crash. And it, along with many of these games, not naming some, caused the game crash of 19. So, what games do you think are terrible? Leave them in the comments below, and please subscribe for more top 10s. Goon on. Bye bye.